Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. From February 4th through the 29th, if you use this promo code, you will automatically be entered into a drawing to win a box of Magic the Gathering Unsanctioned. Also, there is another way to enter where no purchase is necessary. See the link in the description below for full details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends with a big Magic the Gathering news update for you today. First, we're going to go back to last weekend and find out the results of the Magic the Gathering World Championship. We'll also look at some of the deck lists from that event, with a special focus on cards from Theros Beyond Death that performed well. Then we have a new promo card to take a look at, and finally, the 2020 Challenger deck lists are out. We're going to dig into those and see what's going on with that upcoming product. Quick reminder though, before we get into it, if you go over to FlipsideGaming.com, you can use the Heroes promo code. Save 10% on orders over $10. And whenever you use that promo code, it does support the channel, which is always appreciated. So thank you. And without any further ado, let's get into it. First, we're going to look at the results from that Magic the Gathering World Championship. A couple of things to keep in mind when you see these, though. First off, it's a tiny event. Only 16 players, the 16 best in the world, though, from this year. Also, the players play draft as well as standard, so we're going to look at what the top players were playing in standard, but of course, obviously, they did have to do well in draft to get here too. Congratulations to Paulo Vitor Damarosa, who won the whole thing. He came in first place playing Azorius Control. Rounding out second through fourth, you had a Jeskai Fires deck, a Mono Red Aggro deck, and another Jeskai Fires deck. Now, outside of the top four, there were only two other decks that were being played. There were some Temur Reclamation decks and one Jund Sacrifice deck. So we're going to look at one of each of the deck lists. Here's that first place Azorius Control deck, and this deck has been on top of a lot of tournaments recently. It doesn't necessarily choke out all the competition. I don't feel like it's taking over a lot of top 8s necessarily, but sometimes it's the lone deck in the top 8, but it happens to come out on top. And that's what you're seeing here again. This is the best performing by far Azorius Control deck in this tournament, but it also was the winner. Now, the deck has changed a little bit over the last couple weeks. You can see here people are beginning to play some Archon of Sun's Grace. Paulo's got one copy in the main here, two in the sideboard. You also start to see some Banishing Lights creeping in, 2 copies here in the main. Let's go ahead and take a look at the other cards that are here from Theros Beyond Death. So I mentioned Archon of Sun's Grace, of course that's here, Dream Trawler, Shatter the Sky, Thirst for Meaning, the aforementioned Banishing Light, the Birth of Meletus, Elspeth Conquers Death, Omen of the Sea, Field of Ruin, and Temple of Enlightenment. In the sideboard, like we said, 2 more copies of Archon of Sun's Grace. Now, in another version of the deck in the tournament, we did see Heliod's Intervention in the sideboard. Here's that second place Jeskai Fires deck, another deck that looked great on camera. And this is a deck that has been kicking around for quite some time, as far as last season, as a matter of fact. Fires of Invention is here. You have Cavalier of Flame, Cavalier of Gals, all in the main, of course. But there are some cards here from Theros Beyond Death that have enhanced this deck. In the main here you find Dream Trawler. In the side, Shatter the Sky and Elspeth Conquers Death. There were 2 other Jeskai Fires decks in the tournament running Omen of the Sea in the main. Third place is Mono Red Aggro, and this deck is a little different from the one we saw last season. Last season these decks were very focused on Cavalcade of Calamity. This season the deck's going a little bit bigger with 4 copies of Runaway Steamkin. That was a card that, of course, was very successful a couple seasons ago. Then you have Bone Crusher Giants, 4 copies of Robber of the Rich in the main. That was a very key card this weekend, looked really good on camera. 3 copies of Embercleave. That was another all-star performer this weekend. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the cards from Theros Beyond Death. You're going to find Annex Hardened in the Forge in the main. This is the big card now that came from the new set that everybody is using in these decks. Now, the next set of cards weren't in the third place deck, but these did show up in other Mono Red Aggro decks within the tournament. Infuriate sometimes was in the main, and in the sideboard you could find Phoenix of Ash in the Akroan War. Okay, let's look at one of the Temur Reclamation decks. This came in 7th place, the one that did the best out of all of these type of decks. And as you can see here, the deck is very similar to what we saw last season. However, there are some big differences. First, the similarities. 4 copies of Wilderness Reclamation, of course. You're going to find Brazen Borrowers in here. There's 4 copies in this main. You got Growth Spiral, Expansion Explosion, Chemister's Insight. However, there are some new cards from Theros Beyond Death that have again enhanced this deck quite a bit. In the main, Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath. This is a huge card for this deck. Storm's Wrath is also here, Thassa's Intervention, and Temple of Abandon. Now, this deck wasn't doing it, but 2 other Temur Reclamation decks were running Omen of the Sea in the main. Last deck we'll look at from the tournament is Jund Sacrifice. This is the lone Sacrifice deck in the tournament. It came in 9th place. And Sacrifice decks were very prominent last season. They did very well last season. They haven't changed all that much moving from last season to this season, honestly. You will see some new cards here, which we'll look at in a second, but for the most part, this deck list is going to look very familiar to you if you played Standard last season. In the main, though, there are 4 copies of Agonizing Remorse, and there's 1 copy of Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, in the sideboard. Okay, on to that new promo card I mentioned at the top of the show. Now, unfortunately, if you don't live in Japan, it might be kind of hard to get a hold of, but I wanted to at least let you know it's in circulation. And here it is. It's Voltaic Key. You see the promo on the right-hand side. It's a foil. On the left, you see a recent printing of the card for translation purposes. And if you do live in Japan, or you can get your hands on it, there is a book called Destroy All Mankind They Cannot Be Regenerated, Book 4, Volume 26. It comes out on March 26th, and this promo card will be included there. Alright, on to a product you'll have an easier time getting your hands on, and those are the 2020 Challenger decks. They come out on April 3rd. The price point is around $30 for these each. And you have Final Adventure, which is a Golgari deck, Allied Fires, which is Jeskai, Cavalcade Charge, which is Mono Red, and Flash of Ferocity, which is Simic. Now, you look at these titles and these color combinations, and you might think to yourself, okay, these sound familiar. These look like the decks that I saw last season, minus the Oko shenanigans that went on for a while. And you'd be right. Basically, these are last season's decks, and we'll talk more about that in just a second, but let's look at the deck list. Okay, here's Final Adventure. This is a Golgari Adventure deck. Now, is it one of the decks that you saw like a pro playing last season exactly? No, they're not going to quite give you all the cards to bring you there, but what they're trying to do is make a deck that is at least competitive if you show up at Friday Night Magic. Now, with that being said, a lot of good cards are in here, and there's a lot of value packed in here considering the price point is around $30. Keep in mind with these products, these are not new printings of the cards technically. They're going to look just like the former printings, but they are additional copies that are going into the marketplace. So for this deck, I won't spend a ton of time talking about the deck list because you're probably pretty familiar with it. But let's look at a few of the key cards that are included here. They do give you a copy of Vraska, Golgari Queen, which has a little value. Obviously, values of these cards will be going down as these enter the marketplace, though. Keep that in mind. And that particular card doesn't see as much play as it did back when Oko was around, obviously. 2 copies of Murderous Rider are here, which is a great card, and you get 1 copy of Fabled Passage. Very useful card to have. Next we have Allied Fires, but this is really the Fires deck from last season, the one that ran a lot of Planeswalkers. You can see here you have Sarkhan the Masterless, Vugan the Ineffable, 3 Kismina, 4 Narset, 2 Saheeli. So no Cavaliers in this one, but what do you get? Kenrith the Returned King, which was the Buy a Box promo. Pretty cool to get a copy of that. 4 copies of Fires of Invention, and a copy of Steam Vents. Cavalcade Charge is a mono red aggro deck, but again, it's the mono red aggro deck from last season, not necessarily the one we just saw Seth Manfield playing. This will have 4 copies of Cavalcade of Calamity, like I mentioned earlier, 3 copies of Chandra Acolyte of Flame. You're going to see 10 Street Dodgers here, 2 copies of that. What are some of the key cards that you do get, though? Bonecrusher Giant, 4 copies of those, Fervent Champion, 4 copies, and 1 copy of Embercleave. This was a big card, actually spiked pretty aggressively this weekend during the tournament. Obviously, it's already started to go down with this announcement. Flash of Ferocity, the Simic Flash deck. Now, this was very popular last season. I still see people playing this season, and that does go for all the decks. It's not like they've completely disappeared, but for the most part, the meta has moved on a little bit. Now, this deck can still put up a good result. The whole idea of these decks is basically hold on to your mana and make your plays on your opponent's turn, and there are cards that are going to reward you for that, like Nightpack Ambusher, 4 copies of that in the main. There's also 4 copies of Brineborn Cutthroat. So what are some of the key cards here, though? You do get a copy of Brazen Borrower here, which is a huge card, not only in Standard, but in a lot of other formats nowadays. Thassa's Intervention, another great Standard card. You get 2 of those. And there's a copy of Fabled Passage here, too. Okay, time for my final thoughts on the product. Ultimately, I do like it, but it's not for everybody. Let me tell you who it's for. If I go to my Friday Night Magic, maybe shortly after rotation, I haven't been keeping up with Standard, and it's a Standard event. Okay, for $30, I'm probably not winning the tournament, but I can at least participate, maybe win a game here or there, and hopefully have fun. Wonderful. For $30, I'm in for that. The second type of player that might want this is a player that's trying to build one of the more contemporary versions of one of these decks. For example, if I don't have a lot of cards and I want to build mono red aggro, I don't own those Bonecrusher Giants or Fervent Champions, okay, then maybe for $30, this could be a good foundation for me to go ahead and then pick up the other singles I need to build that deck. Now, if I have a lot of cards, if I'm a standard player that's always on the cusp of the meta, then this is not a good product for me because these decks are already outdated and they aren't necessarily fully formed decks either. And there is a reason for that. If they went ahead and threw a bunch of Shocklands in here, threw in a bunch of Fabled Passages, more copies of Embercleave, what would end up happening is these would not be $30 on the street level anymore, and the players these are intended for would never get to buy them. I go to my local game store on Friday Night Magic evening, and I see that this costs $60 to $70. Now I'm not participating anymore, and they could lose me. This is a product that Wizards uses to get a certain group of players either back into the game or keep them into the game. This is not a product for your hardcore standard players whatsoever. Now, when it comes to the timeliness of these decks, there's nothing Wizards can do about it. They're going to have to design these things, bring them to print, bring them to distribution, and these decks are going to be outdated. You ain't getting the decks that you saw at the championship last weekend. It's just impossible. So I do think, considering all that, Wizards has done a great job with this product. They kept the price point down. They gave you a basis to build into something if you want to. They gave you an avenue to play at Friday Night Magic if you need to. And if you're not one of those people, then this will be a pass for you, sure. All right, with that being said, that concludes the news for today. Until next time, though, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.